Okay, so the stream has started. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself if you want to mute yourself too. The stream has started on YouTube.
Okay. All right. Thanks for letting me know. I apologize. I didn't realize I was still unmuted there.
No, you're good. You're good.
Hi, Amanda.
Hey, sorry, I'm gonna be off camera once people are here. I'm at home in the sun, so.
That's okay. The sunshine is lovely today. Don't blame you.
I gotta take it in. It's like last of what we should expect, right? It's December at this point.
Yeah, it was pretty sunny last winter though, so
Okay.
at least for what I'm used to. So.
All right. Then I'll look forward to it.
Yeah, we are streaming on YouTube, so Jenny's already got that set up for us.
Awesome. I'll go get that link and send it to the person who requested it through the form.
Okay. Did you have anybody else sign up for?
Sorry, I'm gonna be off camera once people are here. Oh, sorry, the stream just started on me. I just got one request.
Okay.
So.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
I'll come on camera too, so you're not the only person.
Oh, I'm off camera now.
Yes, you are okay. You're not on camera anymore, Amanda. But Phil is here now.
Oh, hey, Phil.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. How's the lighting?
Looks good.
Okay, good. I have this really weird setup because the light that the communication department gave me is like the size of my room.
Oh goodness.
So I have to turn it. It's barely turned on right now, and this is how bright it is.
Oh wow.
How are y'all doing?
Good. How are you?
This a little bit ago. I want to say like 40 minutes ago, and now I'm drinking some tea because my throat hurts.
Oh.
I do have tea.
I sent it to a few more people today that didn't sign up earlier.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Okay. Do we need to test anything right now?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you want to test anything or try?
Do you want to? Do you want to make sure you can share?
Let's just try to, I guess I'll just try to share.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing.
Share content. Let's see how that goes. So you can see the PowerPoint, I'm assuming?
Yes.
And then if I do this, you can now see the presentation itself?
Yes.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay.
Yes, a cat.
Perfect.
I will stop sharing. How do I do that? someone
I
did it from.
just took over. It's fine.
Yeah. Nice.
There's that. Okay. I couldn't find the polling function in Teams, but I'll admit I didn't look very hard. I was just looking, I was trying to figure out if it's under more actions here or not, and I don't see it. So what we're going to do, I did put them into a Microsoft form.
Okay.
Basically, and so we can just pop the link into the chat box. We also have a post-attendance survey for our attendant for people after the session is over, and so that's going to ask for some speaker feedback as well. And
Sure.
so we'll send on those answers, all the answers onto you. And then just to drive conversation if you want to, I'll have those answers for the questions that you provided during the session. If you wanted to want me to share them at any point, just let me know.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna ask a couple of times for them to like just talk about put in the chat games that they've played that they've felt certain things with.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, I'm also going to mention that, so hopefully they'll be engaging. But if not, then we can. Yeah, those answers will be helpful also. I think we got some good discussion at the end. I'll try to not go above 40 minutes so we can talk for a little bit.
Okay, great.
Jamie, I will have you talk about Horizon Zero Dawn.
That is perfectly fine with me. It is one of my favorite video games.
Okay. I've never played, but I'm using it as an example because I was reading up on the story and I was like, this is crazy.
Oh, it's a crazy story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about it a little bit, but then I'm going to ask you to talk about it afterwards. Or I'm going to ask you to talk about it. You should jump in.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yes, okay.
Oh, that looks worse. Okay. Might as well just see my messy office. That's fine.
Yeah, I have all my nerdy stuff behind me, so because it's actually cleaner in my house back there. Let me move my. Actually, I forgot about this over here.
Okay, so it looks like we've got a couple people in here already. So if you got an attendee and everybody else on the team is here. So I know that you've met me and Jenny. Amanda is a professor of mathematics.
Hey there.
Hey, Amanda.
Innocent Awasam is one of our other STEM librarians. He, I believe, is sitting down at our desk right now, so we may not hear from him too much. And
Yeah.
he says yes.
That's true.
Yeah.
And Rob Weiner is our pop culture and media studies. No, not media studies. What is it?
Fine arts.
Fine arts, thank you.
Yeah.
The fine arts librarian. I was thinking theater, but I was like, it's broader than that.
Rob, I work with the other Rob Peasley. He's on my committee for my dissertation.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Cool.
So we have some of these conversations about fandom and Star Wars and stuff like that. Always a good time.
Yeah. Well, as you know, Dr. Peasley's my partner, and we've done quite a few books together.
Yes. Good to finally meet you, even though it's virtual.
Yes, nice to meet you. And Dr. Peasley's brilliant.
Yes, yes, he is. It's a problem sometimes.
Yeah.
Do you want to give people another minute or two, or?
I'm okay with whatever y'all want to do. I have some people that told me that they might join, and I don't think they're here yet, so maybe another minute.
Yeah, we can wait.
I can't really see. Oh, here we go. Show participants.
And I'll be honest, I don't have the YouTube thingy up right now, so I don't know how many people are watching the feed either. But I'll be able to check on that in a few minutes.
Oh yeah, some of them might be on the YouTube. Right, I forgot about that. Okay.
Because you had to have a Teams account to log into today's session, and we're going to restructure that for next time. So we do apologize for anybody who wanted to attend but couldn't log into Teams for some reason.
Sorry, just doing the YouTube just to see how it's going over there. It's a little bit behind, so that wasn't me talking again. That was me talking on the video.
Yeah, there is a little bit of a delay there. All right, well, maybe more people will join as we go along here. All right, so I got a little bit of an introduction here. So hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's session. My name is Erin Burns, and I am moderating today's session. I am part of the planning team for the Science Meets Popular Culture Speaker Series here at the University Libraries at Texas Tech University. Other members of this planning team include Jenny Jacobs, Amanda Lobmeyer, Innocent Awasam, and Rob Weiner. Today's session will be When Video Games Make Us Cry. It's presented by Philippe Chavot. Am I saying that correctly?
It was close.
Okay.
Yeah.
Phil is a native of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil and arrived at Texas Tech in 2019. He's a doctoral candidate in the College of Media and Communication, where he conducts research on interactive media and emotions. Specifically, he is interested in how video games make us feel deeper emotions, such as awe, appreciation, and meaningfulness. When he is not in his office, Phil can be found at the gym playing basketball or at home watching anime. We are live streaming on YouTube, and closed captions are provided through Teams. There are instructions for this on the first slide. So to turn on closed captioning, go ahead and go to your meeting controls, then click more options and turn on live captions. Any questions can be submitted in Teams through the chat box, and questions can be addressed at any point during the presentation. This chat and comment feature has been turned off in YouTube for today. And now Phil can correct me on how to say his name.
Oh, sure. It was close. It is Felipe, but I go by Phil, and it's Chavot, but that was close.
Chavot. Okay. Sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So I take over now?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Just like Skynet. Okay, here we go. All right, everyone. So it's a pleasure to be here, even though it's virtual. I really am happy to be a part of this whole science meets pop culture idea, because that's kind of like where I live in my research. So I'm really excited for this. And as Erin said, the title of this talk is When Video Games Make Us Cry, Eudaimonia in Video Games. We're going to be talking a little bit about deeper emotions when you play video games. And that's not something that happens, right? Just kidding. Everyone who's played a game probably has a story about that. And down there, I have my Twitter handle. So if you want to engage with me there, or like send me questions or whatever, I'm about to talk about video games for like 40 minutes. So I do like to talk about them. And I will talk about them more with you via Twitter if you'd like. But to begin, before I get into the topic of today's talk, I like to ground these chats on my own experiences with video games. So as we talked about before, or Aaron introduced me, there's my name. I'm a doctoral candidate here at Texas Tech, and I'm from Rio. And there's a picture of me, surprise, surprise, playing a video game. Fun fact about that picture is that's not my cat, my couch, or my PS4. But I like the picture, so I use it a lot because it kind of encapsulates my experience when I'm not at the TTU rec getting beat in basketball at 50-year-old men. But what I do is I research video games, of course, and I research video games and entertainment. So how they make us feel things like just pure joy and bliss, like that family over there, but also more specifically how they can make us feel like this Mario here. How sometimes video games make us feel sad or, self-reflective and things like that, but we still like to play them. So how does that happen? When I didn't start being interested in this when I first started playing video games, but it was a foreshadowing. So when I was about 7 years old, my parents got me a Nintendo 64. And by the way, Nintendo 64 games are now on the Switch as retro games, and that really messed me up as someone who doesn't think of himself as a little older, but I guess I am now. And when I was playing, when they gave me the Nintendo 64, I kind of just looked at this like VHS looking contraption. And I was like, what is this? Why are you giving me this VHS? Who cares? But then they fired up Mario Kart for the first time, and I was absolutely enthralled, right? I was taken aback. And if you've never played Mario Kart, well, first of all, I'm sorry because it's really great and you should. But secondly, you should know that it's a very silly game. If the picture doesn't tell you the whole story, basically you use these silly characters on tiny go-karts in these crazy tracks, and you toss turtle shells at each other, and that's just fun. So typically you don't really experience like enthrallment or being taken aback with a game like Mario Kart, or you maybe shouldn't because it's just fun. But I did, and that story is kind of the inspiration for why I study video games with these deeper emotions, because I felt it when I was a kid, and I still feel when I play games now, and I can't be the only one. And I hope that I wasn't, and it turns out I'm not. There's a good amount of research on this, which I'm going to cover here in the next few slides. So before I get into the actual what I'm going to cover today, I wanted to talk a little bit about the terms I'm going to be using. So as you see, this term eudaimonia was in the title of the talk, and its counterpart is Hedonia. And these are two types of entertainment outcomes that you can have when you engage with a piece of media, specifically with a video game. So Hedonia, these are both ancient Greek words, right? So Hedonia is essentially, it's just ancient Greek for pleasure. It is just fun. Whenever you experience something that is hedonic entertainment, you are enjoying it. And enjoyment is shorthand for hedonic, fun entertainment. Eudaimonia, on the other hand, is ancient Greek for you, which is good, and daimon, which is spirit. So the idea that you have this entertainment that is good for personal growth. It makes you think, you appreciate it. It's a little trickier to explain than just fun, right? So think of it as eudaimonia is an appreciation or a deeper emotion, a feeling of poignancy, of being moved you get when you interact with a piece of media, specifically a video game. We have hedonic entertainment, enjoyment, eudaimonic entertainment, appreciation, okay? Feelings of being moved. So what I'm going to talk about today is, first of all, the dual model of entertainment, hedonic and eudaimonic entertainment. Good news is we just did that, so we're in good shape. And then I'm going to cover a little bit the history of video games and why this distinction is important. What is eudaimonic entertainment? And these are going to be the bulk of the talk today. And then some future considerations, where this research is going, and some of my own work on the topic. So first of all, thinking about the history of video games. So they were actually created to tax systems. They were a way of demonstrating that, look how powerful our computer is. We can actually make a program that you can interact with and move it as it's programming, as it's happening, right? And that was the intent behind the first video game called Space War with an exclamation mark, from 1962. And that's a picture of it, two people playing it at the MIT lab, that's where it was created, at MIT. And again, the idea there was just, we need to show how powerful this computer is. Let's make a game. And games until, beginning of games were based on quick inputs. You're moving these Pong paddles around. It's not super based on story. And this started to change in the mid to late 80s, where you have, I don't know why that happened. Let's go back. In the mid to late 80s, when you had games like Final Fantasy come out, which was a role-playing game heavily based on story. And it's called Final Fantasy because the creator, and I forgot his name now, but the creator had this Final Fantasy, this ideal that video games could tell stories. So he created Final Fantasy fully expecting it to fail. But no, it did succeed, and there's a bunch of sequels, and it's one of the most beloved franchises of all time. Even though at the time, video games weren't really considered this medium where they could tell stories. But in society today, we have a different perception, right? So they are ubiquitous; they're everywhere. Since 2018, video games have the video game industry has garnered more revenue per year than the film industry, than Hollywood. So in 2018, video games were at about 44 billion in revenue. Hollywood is at like 42, and since then that gap has held. It's a little different with COVID, but video games passed Hollywood before COVID. The average gamer, contrary to popular belief, is 31 years old. So it's not your typical teenage boy in the basement. They are 31-year-olds in basements. No, I'm kidding. Although basements are really good for gaming because there's no glare on the screen, but the average gamer is 31 years old, and they are everywhere. 67% of Americans, so over 2/3 of adults, are gamers, identify as a gamer in some way. So they're everywhere. But we still have these typical responses to video games. They're fun, they're pleasurable, they're enjoyable. We play them to have fun, right? And that's totally fine. It's not like I'm saying that these aren't responses you should have when you play a video game. No, you should have fun when you play a video game. That's what they're for. They are supposed to be these pleasurable experiences. And these are the hedonic experiences I was talking about a little earlier, right? So it is the subjective experience of pleasure. When you play with your family and you're having a good time, like up there on the top right, or you play a co-op silly paint shooter game like Splatoon, or you play by yourself, but you play as a goose that terrorizes a village, like that GIF there on the bottom of this poor man hammering his own thumb and then falling through the door. By the way, that is a real game. In case you don't know, it's literally called Untitled Goose Game, and it won Game of the Year in 2019. 90% of gamers say they play video games because it brings them joy, which is great. It's a pleasurable experience. And what brings me joy about this slide, besides the Untitled Goose Game GIF there, which is hilarious, is the fact that on the top picture with the family, they're all playing this PS4 together, but they're actually not playing, because if you've ever played a PS4, you know that the controller has a light up function that's pretty conspicuous, and those controllers are not lit up. So they're actually not playing the game, but they're really good actors and they're having fun. But we can have fun with games. We know that. What happens when we play games like these two? So for example, Life is Strange. This game is a absolutely riveting coming of age story where you play as a young teenage girl that witnesses a murder, but as it's happening, finds out that she can go back in time through photographs and these cues. So you can go back and change these events that happened, but true to butterfly effects, you end up changing more things that you didn't mean to change. So now maybe there's an even worse outcome, or sometimes you perceive that's not good either. So you try to go back in time again, and every time you do, something else changes. So you're coming of age as a teenage girl, but at the same time, you're making these decisions that are changing the fabric of reality. It's a really good story, really beautiful, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about it here in a little bit, or actually at the end of the presentation. Or we have games that are not based on choices, but have these deep emotional experiences as well, such as Horizon Zero Dawn. And I included this because of one of the people organizing this talk mentioned it as something that made her feel some deeper emotions. So in Horizon Zero Dawn, you are like the last hope of humanity in the world, like 3020. And what happens is, what always happens, right? Someone created an AI in like the year 2000 that went bad, and it kind of tried to eradicate all of society. And your goal is to help bring down this AI and survive. But the idea is that you find these clues of the stories, you see how the story of this world happened, the remorse in the people that created the AI and the people that tried to save humanity thousands of years ago, and how they saved their culture. And it's really a striking tale of what happens if we don't take care of our planet and our history, not necessarily just because of AI takeovers, that's also a concern, but just in terms of climate and things like that. So it's a really good story. When we play these games, it is possible that we feel something more than fun, or we feel like eudaimonia, so a good spirit, right? We're building our spiritual base with these games. And like I said before, it's a little tricky to define, so we can appreciate these games. We can be moved by them. We can experience personal growth and other things. So why are we able to have these emotions with video games? Well, I'll tell you as soon as I take a sip of my water. It's because, as I was talking about a little earlier, video games have evolved. We know they provide a tapestry of emotions ranging from fun to guilt to anything in between. So from enjoyment to guilt, right? So much like film, we don't doubt the fact that film can make us feel sad or accomplished or proud of something that we've just watched or one with the world, right? Movies can do that. In movies like Hotel Rwanda and Sophie's Choice, there are movies that we'd say are fun, right? If you've never watched Hotel Rwanda or Sophie's Choice, highly recommend. Hotel Rwanda, based on a true story of the genocide in 1994 in that country, and Sophie's Choice, based on, it's the concept where the plot is the mother has to choose which one of their children gets to survive when Nazis come calling. Neither is a fun premise. Both are highly entertaining experiences for different reasons. So when the first film came out in 1910, around 1910, and by the way, that is a GIF of the first film. It is a horse running. That's the first film. If you came up to someone in that time period and said, "Oh man, these things are going to make us feel really sad in like 20 years, like 100 years," they'd be like, "What are you talking about? This is a horse running. Why would I be sad about this?" Right? That's kind of where games are now. We have this experience of like, why would something like Pong make me feel anything other than a spirit of competition and fun? It's because games have evolved. We tell stories through games now. And the way we tell stories through games is the way that might make eudaimonic outcomes in these games even more prevalent than in movies. Although that's not necessarily a comparison, but they also occur in video games. So how do we do that? Well, we tell stories in games through interactivity, right? Games are different from films through the idea that you can impact what's on the screen. Pretty simple to think about, but we still need to define it. So interactivity is a property of the medium. Films, most of them, excluding like Bandersnatch on Netflix, which you can actually interact with and make decisions in that show. Films happen, you engage with them passively, so to speak, that you watch them, right? Video games, you're actually doing the actions. There's a really good quote from a video game researcher that the idea that what's different about video games to movies is that if someone's crying, chances are you both A, caused it, and B, can solve it, right? In movies, someone's crying in the background, that's just something that's happening. You can't really do anything about it. Video games can be interactive. They've been interactive since Pong, where you're moving the paddles around, or when you're looking at VR Iron Man experiences. But the idea basically is that if you're that Mario right there, it's stuck in that infinite loop. If another Goomba comes around or another enemy comes around and you don't jump, you die and you lose the game. So you're literally forced to make a decision, to make a choice, to interact with the medium, and that puts you more or immerses you more in the story, or it can, which is what some research has shown. In eudaimonia, or deeper emotions with video games, are largely related to the story and the narration of a game. You can also, what interactivity does is also provides you with agency. So this agency comes in the form of choices, right? So some games give you choices on how you can change how a game goes. So for example, here in the top right, we have this example of, do you want to show understanding towards Tomas, or do you want to get angry at him? And personally, as just the kind of gamer I am, I would get angry at him because it seems like he did something annoying. I don't really like Tomas. But choosing show understanding would give you 15 diamonds, which I'm assuming is a good thing. Other games like the Persona series, and you see this in the middle here, you have several conversations you have with people that you can just talk to them and you feel like you're more in the game because you have this agency of responding as the main character. You're not passively watching a main character talk to someone, you're actually doing these interactions. And on the bottom right here, you have this taken to the extreme, right? Your ability to affect the narrative based on choices. So here's a hostage situation from the game Detroit Become Human, in which if you want to save this little girl, and you can do that by pressing one of these buttons. And when you do, you can either give this person the last chance, you can trust them, you can use a rational argument, or you can bluff. And if you choose the right choice, maybe you save the girl. But if you don't, something that's not so great might happen, and that affects the whole narrative around it, right? And that could lead us to some really deeper emotions with these games if we choose the right option and we don't get the proper outcome of that hostage situation. That's not necessarily a fun situation. It is engaging them. And so that's kind of the history of video games and how we got to being able to look at eudaimonia in games, and how the research of eudaimonia in games started. And I have that in quotes because Mary Beth Oliver, she's a researcher from Penn State, and she's been looking at eudaimonia in media since like 1993, where she had a piece on why we enjoy or why we are entertained by tearjerkers, so movies that are really, really sad. And she worked on this for a while with some colleagues, and then finally it was moved over to video games in 2016. And what they did was they had gamers respond to questions where they asked them, what is the most fun or most meaningful gaming experience you ever had? And they didn't define what most fun or pleasure was, and they didn't define what most meaningful or eudaimonia or appreciation was, because we weren't really sure at the time what, if anything, from eudaimonia would actually translate to video games. But what they found was that 72% of gamers were able to recall meaningful experiences. And that's pretty important, because it's the idea that if we ask a gamer on the street, tell me about a meaningful experience you've had with the game, they won't be like, what are you talking about? 7 out of 10 of these people will be like, oh, wow, I remember this one time I played Horizon Zero Dawn and it was crazy. I had to experience these really deep emotions, blah, 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 blah. So games really aren't just for fun. They are fun, but there's more to them. And this study kind of continued, but they had a lot of data, and Rogers and colleagues used that data and did a qualitative analysis of these responses, right? So people talking about the most fun or most meaningful experiences they had. And what they found is that people that talked about gameplay as fun, games as fun, they talked about gameplay. Talked about how smooth the gameplay was. Pressing A to jump was immediate. There was no lag. They liked how the controller layout was. They liked to jump around. The gameplay worked well with the environment, stuff like that. People that talked about games being meaningful, they talked about how the narrative worked, the plot twists, the characters, their connections with other players and with characters, which is really interesting because that's really how we think about eudaimonia and hedonic entertainment in films. We think about this sort of situation, but with video games, the hedonic entertainment seems to come from the actual ludic components, so the gameplay. How smooth does it feel? How does it work? And the meaningful component comes from, is this a good narrative? Is it engaging? Am I connecting with the players and the characters? And that's important when we talk about what sort of entertainment we get from games. It's both, right? We get hedonic and eudaimonic entertainment there. So the current state of research kind of reflects this, and this was a scoping review done by Daniels and colleagues, and it just came out earlier this year, where they looked at, okay, we've had 5 or 6 years since they started really looking at eudaimonia in video games. What are the studies that have been done, and what are the patterns they have found about what eudaimonia is? Because it's still really much in its infancy, right? We've only been studying this for real, quote unquote, for about 5 to 6, maybe 10 years. So what they found is they found a few patterns. First, eudaimonia was usually talked about as appreciation, which is a simple shorthand for eudaimonia. It was related to meaningfulness, to emotional challenges, and to self-reflective experiences, not necessarily which aren't necessarily appreciation, but they do co-vary and are related to them. They also found, really interestingly, that there was a sense of social connectedness that was related to these deeper emotions. So playing games with others led to deeper emotions. And some eudaimonia related concepts, so non-hedonic, but also perhaps not eudaimonia, so not necessarily appreciation, but nostalgia and well-being that comes from playing deeper or experiencing deeper emotions of video games that aren't necessarily appreciation. Not necessarily appreciation or eudaimonia. So I'm going to cover these 4 patterns real quick. Or not real quick, this is going to be what we're going to cover for the bulk of the rest of the presentation. So first, appreciation. And there's a definition that was used by Oliver and colleagues in that first big study on video games and eudaimonia. And you see there, it's a perception of deeper meaning, having deeper feelings inspired by the video gaming experience. And it is helpful to think of as an overarching concept, but like our friend Ditto here, the Pokemon that can transform to anything and it's just a pink blob, it's not super well defined. So for example, appreciation is a response to what in games? And apparently several different things. So we can look at this as appreciation as a response to serious content. So on the far right, that is a game called Abzu, in which you have no real goal other than you're exploring the ocean, and it's these beautiful environments, and it's supposed to simulate what the ocean is without being touched by man as much, and you explore the ocean, you find new species, new animals, new plants, etc. It's a beautiful experience, but not necessarily one we usually associate with just pointy shooty running around video games. It's more serious content, and we have a deeper emotion when we engage with that. Appreciation can also come from more morally challenging content, so ethical dilemmas, right? So on the top middle here is a screenshot from the game Spec Ops: The Line, which is a first-person or third-person shooter in which you play. It's a war game, but there's a mission in which you're trapped and you have access to some bio-warfare type of situations you can unleash on this village with what you think are enemies and hostiles. So even though you don't think you should do it, you have to do it, or you have to unleash this weapon, or else you won't survive. So you do it, and you end up decimating the village. But then when you go through the village afterwards to get where you need to go, turns out those were mostly innocent women and children and some of your allies that you had just bombed. And you have to grapple with that as a character and as a person who just made that choice in the game, right? And that leads you to some deeper emotions with the game, some appreciation, not necessarily fun, but still entertainment. And also with the artistic qualities of games. So on the bottom middle here, that is a screenshot from Breath of the Wild, which is a game that has these beautiful open world environments where everything is interconnected. The artistry is beautiful, the sound is beautiful, etc. So when you perceive the setting to be beautiful, you appreciate the music, the design, these artistic qualities also lead to a larger sense of appreciation for the video game. So what these studies found, more importantly here, is that appreciation as eudaimonia exists. And it's also always separate from enjoyment. But importantly, they are related. So the slide I showed earlier where I had Hedonia versus eudaimonia in the Street Fighter background, it's not necessarily that. It's more like you can experience both. You have Hedonia, hedonic enjoyment, you have fun with the game, but you can also have these eudaimonic experiences that make you feel a deeper sense of appreciation for the video game. So beyond those, beyond the appreciation, which is a specific way to think about eudaimonia, we also have these other concepts that are related to eudaimonia and to appreciation, but are not the same. Meaningfulness, emotionally challenging experiences, and self-reflection. Essentially here, the idea is that meaningfulness is when you go beyond hedonism. And I don't love this term because it sounds like I'm saying that like a video game experience that's just fun. So if you play Splatoon or Mario Kart or Rocket League and all you do is have quote unquote just fun, that's not a less valuable experience than playing a game that has a deeper connection makes you feel a deeper connection to the world, for example. They're both equally valuable experiences, they're just different outcomes, right? But the idea here is that you feel something meaningful when the experience goes beyond this was not just fun, it was also something that moved me, it was meaningful. And a lot of times it can occur when you have choices in video games that create this meaningfulness scenario where when you choose something and then at the end of the game that choice impacts your character in a specific way, that makes you feel like the game had meaning, like it was meaningful. And again, this is mostly unique to video games. What meaningfulness does is it creates a sense of purpose from within games to the real world. So you can take those experiences in the game, the feelings you had while you were playing it, and apply them to yourself as you're going through your own experiences in the real world, right, in the physical world. So I have two examples here of two very interesting games that kind of create that situation. So on the top right, that game is called Journey. And it, again, your only goal, you're not really given a lot of story. Your only goal is to get to the top of that mountain. And you're in these really harsh but beautiful desert and wintry environments. And for you to get there, it's really tough, and you have to go to all these hardships by yourself. And sometimes you have a second player helping you. And you can really translate the hardship of these travels of when you're going through to perhaps your own experiences in your life, or what you're going through school and work, and you have a family to take care of at the same time. And you can take those experiences and apply it to your own. On the bottom right here, it's called Firewatch. And that is, it's been called a walking simulator, kind of derisively, but that's actually what it is, and it's supposed to be that. You're basically a fire lookout in a national park that has a fire happening. And you're trying to find clues for who started it, or for there's a mystery afoot, right? And you're just walking around, and all your exposition is through a walkie-talkie with someone, another fire lookout, miles away. And you find out that this fire lookout became this person because they had a really bad divorce and they lost their kid, and they're trying to like rebuild their life. And at the same time, they're trying to solve this mystery in a national park. And that sort of deeper story and deeper connection you can form with this character leads you to appreciate these sorts of situations in the real world. You perhaps look at people differently after understanding that everyone's kind of going through something, even if you can't see it. So, of course, these are deeper, and these deeper jumps that I'm making for how you connect to these things, but that's how meaningfulness works, right? It's in the eye of the beholder. You see something that is meaningful to yourself, to your own life, and you appropriate that from the game into your own life. And meaningfulness really happens in the cognitive level. So you're thinking about it. You think about this type of person, or about the hardships you may go, and how you can apply that, or those feelings you had, to your own life and how it relates to your own life. So that's meaningfulness. You also have in games the idea of emotionally challenging content. So these are when players react to in-game events and have these affective responses to the in-game content. So an emotional response to an in-game content. So these often happen with narration and plot twists, right? So you lose a character in the game, a character that's dear to you that dies in the game or goes away, or making difficult choices, which is how a lot of games work. And what's important about these is that, unlike some other challenges that you have in games that are associated with fun and enjoyment, these cannot be overcome with skill. So you can't shoot your way out of this one, so to speak, right? You have to resolve the tension, this emotional tension, by emotionally exploring these difficult themes and confronting them. So on the bottom right here, you see how a lot of choices are made in games. It's a dialogue, and they give you this dialogue wheel in which you have a couple of options on how you want to respond to something. And some of these are simple, like, do you want to grab like a grape flavored soda or a strawberry flavored soda? That's fine. But some of the choices are really deep. Like, so in Mass Effect 3 on the bottom here, at one point you have to choose to try to save a character, or to let them die so you can save the rest of your crew. And depending on what you choose, so let's say you choose to try to save them, you're not able to. But then they actually do end up surviving, and at the end of the game they come to your aid. And then let's say that you choose not to, right? It's a really difficult decision, but you need to save your crew over this one person. They actually end up surviving as well, but then at the end of the game they come back and they betray you, and it's an extra enemy you have to fight. So your choices not only matter for the gameplay, but they're emotionally difficult. And this happens in Life is Strange, and that's probably like the most emotionally difficult choice I've ever had to make in a game. So when you're playing Life is Strange, you get to the very end of the game and you've made all these time jumps to the past. You've trained so much that there's a storm coming through town because you've essentially fluttered so many butterfly wings that is a tornado is coming through the town that you grew up in. And the one way for you to solve this, and you can, is if you go back in time before your first choice ever, which, remember, was to save your best friend or a friend of yours, who now is your best friend, and your love interest from being murdered. Essentially, you're choosing, do I go back in time and everything I've lived with this person gets erased? I let them die and the town survives? Or do I watch as this tornado rips through my town and thousands of innocent people die? That's like an impossible choice. It's like a Sophie's Choice situation, right? But you're in a video game. So we don't typically think of these as like, oh, it's a game, it's just supposed to be fun. No, that was not a fun choice to make. And it's something that's really personal to people, especially if you go into like Discords and Reddits and you talk about it. People talk about all these sorts of different reasonings for why they made the choice, and if they went back and played it again. Some people chose to not play it again because they wanted that finality of not being able to go back and change it, which is interesting because a game is about going back and changing things. So these emotional challenges really lead to these deeper appreciation or deeper feelings with video games. We also have something that we call self-reflective experiences. So unlike cognitively thinking about the game and the hardships and how you apply that to your own life, or having these affective emotions or reactions to games, we also have a situation where players contemplate and try to understand themselves just based on the game. And this usually occurs through some sort of perspective taking. So empathy, right? So being in the shoes of someone that you wouldn't usually be able to do or be in. And video games are really good at this because sure, you can watch a movie and you can kind of see what it's like to be someone else. But in a video game, you're actually playing as that person, experiencing the things that that person would experience in their own world, right? Or in your own world. And these sometimes are intentionally uncomfortable experiences. So for example, here, I have the game called Detroit Become Human, which is about AI becoming sentient and starting their own like civil rights movement. And it's a huge allegory for the civil rights movement of the 60s and 70s. And you can play as the leader of this AI movement, and you may have to make decisions like, do I want to protest peacefully? Do I want to attack the police? Do I want to break into a precinct and steal some evidence so that other AIs don't get incriminated? And you get discriminated by the police and by other people on the street, and you have to live with this as an AI. How do you react? It's all these micro and macro aggressions that certain people, minoritized populations, go through in our physical world, in the game, and you can experience that as a character yourself. And it's a really powerful experience, even though some of the gameplay was challenged some of the themes were challenged for being overly simplistic. It is still a really powerful experience when you go through this game as someone who is not necessarily one of the minoritized populations. And then you also have personal growth through these situations, right? So it improves your self-confidence because you can interact with these situations in real life in a way that you couldn't before because of your gameplay experiences. So thinking about video games as appreciation or deeper emotions through meaningfulness, through emotional challenges, and through self-reflectiveness are some ways that we were expecting to find or expected the research to progress in. We're looking at eudaimonic experiences. Self-reflection is related to appreciation. That makes sense. Something that's really interesting in the vein of research for eudaimonic outcomes of games that's been picking up is the idea that there is social connectedness in these eudaimonic experiences, right? So connecting with someone socially is eudaimonic. So games are social objects. Like even from the first game I showed you from the MIT, right? Space War, you had to play that with someone else. Arcades, people went there to play against others, and they waited and they formed these communities. And now we form these communities online where we go in and we game with others that we know and both don't know. So you can connect with others in games with games in a way that only these video games can afford. And they fulfill these relatedness needs that we have as humans to be a part of something bigger, to be with someone else, right? Because we do have those needs. Connecting with others is eudaimonic. That's the experience. That's how people have been talking about it, right? We have connecting with others forms a deeper connection. We have a deeper emotion when we connect with others. And also it is a goal of gameplay. And I can ask here, or we can talk about this later, how many people you play a game because you want to play with other humans or with your friends. So for example, World of Warcraft, people form entire guilds and you have these hierarchical situations in there, and you are part of something bigger, part of a team, much like you're part of a team in real life sometimes in your work or with your friends. This happens online too and in a specific way, right? Or even in the game like Apex Legends, where it is a fun, fast-paced shooter, arena shooter, or survival game, but you play as a team and you talk to others via microphone or via chat, and you have to strategize to survive. So people, they want to play these games because they want to be a part of something bigger. They want to connect with others. Not only that, you want to connect with your characters, or you've experienced this deeper emotion as eudaimonia when you identify with not only your playable character, but not only that, when you perceive your character as a social other. So you don't have to answer this, but I'm going to phrase that as a question. How many people have played a game in which you have a main character and you take actions not as you would if you were that character in that character's shoes, but how you think that character would act based on how they have their own story, right? We perceive them as social agents, and when we connect with them that way, we have these meaningful interactions that lead to eudaimonic appreciation and deeper emotions with gameplay. So connecting with others can be eudaimonic, but there's also some other situations where non-hedonic outcomes, so not necessarily eudaimonia, but other deeper emotions that come with games that we can experience. So like nostalgia is a really big one. And this research is fairly recent also, but it's really picking up steam because nostalgia, it's this bittersweet recollection of your past events and others. So we've all been nostalgic. We know what it feels like. It's really hard to describe though, right? Because you're thinking about, wow, that was a really good time in my life, but also it's gone forever and I have to accept that. So it's sweet, but at the same time, you're like, man, I wish I could go back, but at the same time, I don't. It's a complex emotion. It is reflective. You can connect with others over it, right? You can meet some of your high school friends and be like, wow, remember when we played soccer against that one team, or we went on that one trip, how fun that was. That's gone, but it's still fun to think about, still sweet to think about, but it's not ever going to happen again, right? And nostalgia is really powerful with games because, as we talked about before, games are interactive. They give you agency. You really feel connected to these characters in games. So if you pick up a game that you played in like 1995 and you can remember what it was like to be in your room in your house with your parents maybe cooking dinner, and you have no care in the world, all you do is play this game, and you think about that experience as you're playing the game now, what does that do for our experiences? It usually leads to some nostalgic outcomes, which are self-reflective, and they are related to appreciation. Nostalgia has also been identified as a reason to engage with games or in gameplay. So remember Pokemon Go. A lot of people said that they play Pokemon Go because when they were growing up, their dream was to go around the world and catch Pokemon. And now you're telling me I can do that with my phone? Yeah, I'm going to play that, right? So people did that for a while and it kind of wore off, but some people still play it. And part of the reason was for nostalgia.